afternoon, everyone. Good to have you with us this afternoon as we prepare for the 22nd Sunday of Ordinary Time in Cycle A. Let's have a look at the readings for this coming Sunday. What have we got? Well, the first reading is taken from the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 20, verses 7 to 9. Our responsorial psalm for this Sunday is Psalm 63. The second reading is our continuation of St. Paul's letter to the Romans, and it's the beginning of chapter 12. Chapter 12, verses 1 to 2. The Gospel is from St. Matthew's Gospel. It is a continuation of last week's famous Gospel about who do you say that I am? So this is Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 to 27. And as I said, it is a continuation from last Sunday's Gospel. Last Sunday we heard St. Peter affirm who Jesus is. You are the Messiah, the Anointed One, the Son of the living God. And all of a sudden the tone changes, and that sort of very uplifting gospel of last Sunday is filled with a bit of foreboding, a sense of death. The cross starts to loom rather large over the gathered disciples in Caesarea Philippi. And this change is mirrored really in the gospel itself. Really, from now, the disciples' focus changes as Jesus makes his way for Jerusalem. And in fact, the gospel begins, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. And so the period of formation and teaching of disciples that have been taking place up to now suddenly changes a little bit as they head towards Jerusalem, and we know what is waiting in Jerusalem, the death and resurrection of Jesus. So the sudden change in this gospel story from a happy Peter who has a sense, an idea of a Messiah who is going to change the lot of the Jewish people, get rid of the horrible Romans and establish a wonderful kingdom where everyone will prosper and be good. That image is changed as Jesus rebukes Peter and speaks about carrying crosses. And I think that's a big theme for this Sunday. The challenge of being a disciple of Jesus. But it's not limited just to being a disciple of Jesus. As we see in the first reading, the prophet Jeremiah is really battling with the mission that he has been given. A mission he has been given from before he was born. That he is to speak of God's ways, to proclaim God's word to the people. And this is going to be difficult. It's going to cause stresses and strains in the prophet's life, and they do, and he's wanting to give up. He feels abandoned by God. And so the sense of discipleship, of doing the will of God as a challenge, sometimes even a cross that we have to bear, comes out, I think, quite clearly in this Sunday's readings. But, of course, we know that God is present, that God is there. And while Jesus must go to Jerusalem with the disciples, he must go to Jerusalem, he must suffer, he must die, but he must also rise again. And there is, therefore, a sense of comfort in knowing that God's will is to bring reconciliation, healing, love, mercy, and ultimately new life out of difficult situations. I think that comes through very clearly also in our readings. The reading from St. Paul's letter to the Romans is a bit of a change of what we've had over the last few Sundays. This is a sort of more moral section, teaching on living in as a Christian in a moral way. And it's based on, St. Paul thinks, it's based on living every day in response to God's mercy, God's love, how God treats us. And because we know God is merciful, because we know that there is a plan for our salvation, we live a certain way. We live in accordance to the commandments of God and the ways that Jesus sets out. And St. Paul also links this in some ways to our worship, that our living, the way we live, is reflected in our worship, and our worship is reflected in the way we live. So we can't come to Mass and be good and sing nicely and appear all holy and yet walk out the doors of the church and live completely contrary to the commandments of God. And so the way we live, the way we respond to God, should also be mirrored in our worship. And so it's about the whole of our lives, offering all of our lives to God. And St. Paul talks about offering our bodies, and that symbolizes the wholeness of our worship and our living. So there's some thoughts for this coming Sunday. I hope to see you at Mass this coming Sunday. It'll be good to have you with us. And wherever you are in the world, you're welcome to join us on our YouTube channel. God bless you all. Bye-bye.